Hi there, I'm Judy Holland, and welcome to Happy Nest, the podcast where you can hear the latest research and best advice for living well when your kids leave home. Join me as I interview experts and explore how to reinvent yourself during this critical passage. I hope you'll head over to judyhollandauthor.com and check out my new book, Happy Nest, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home. I'm here today with Margie Warrell, an author and speaker extraordinaire. She spent much of her career telling people how to be brave. Margie's speaking to me over Zoom from Singapore, where she's quarantined as her husband Andrew is recovering from coronavirus in hospital, as she says in her Australian way. Her family life these days is mostly virtual. 3 of her 4 kids are scattered around the globe. Tune in to this episode for tips about getting a better psychological grip on life in the time of COVID. We discuss the gifts you can glean from this crisis if you practice gratitude, serve others, and tell yourself positive narratives. Welcome to another Happy Nest podcast. I'm here today with Margie Warrell, who's been my guest once before. Margie has since then written a book, You've Got This. Margie, now that we're in the middle of this pandemic that just landed on us like a ton of bricks, have you got this, Margie? And can you help me and my listeners get a grip?
Look, it's funny because my book officially released in the United States on the 30th of March, and I was supposed to be, Judy, taking off on a 1-month speaking tour and book tour. And of course, I'm actually in Singapore now in quarantine. My husband's in hospital with COVID-19, and my life is so far from the one I had thought I would be living at this moment in time. But I know, of course, Judy, it's not just me who's thinking, what happened?
Right.
And so over the last couple of weeks, I mean, actually, when my husband messaged me, he flew in from the US. He was just over there taking one of our youngest son on a college tour, flew back into Singapore, and within 24 hours was feeling feverish. Within 48 hours was at the hospital, and I haven't seen him since. And that's nearly 2 weeks ago. And so I've well and truly needed to lean in to my own teachings and my own body of work. And of course, what I can tell you is, Judy, of course I've got this. I've absolutely got this. And you've got this. And everyone listening, we have got this. And I don't mean that in the context of you've got coronavirus. I mean, right. You've got what it takes to deal with the challenges that this extraordinary time is throwing at us. I know in the last couple of weeks, I mean, I have a son living and he's in Manhattan right there in the midst of it all now. I have 3 children in the US. One son who's been under his spring break, instead of going off with friends, was in quarantine with his mum for 2 weeks. So what I can tell you is that we can still have it in the sense of, I've got this, but that doesn't mean I haven't felt vulnerable. That doesn't mean I haven't had moments where I've felt overwhelmed or I've felt anxious for my husband. He was really sick for about a week. He's on the road to recovery now, but still in hospital. And I think trusting in ourselves that we can meet each moment as it comes up, and we can meet the challenges of this time. And I know there's a lot of challenges, like financial challenges, family, health, lives being upended. But that doesn't mean that we don't at times feel vulnerable or that we don't at times feel anxious. And what I've practiced and well and truly doubled down on over the last 12 days, just staying in a pretty confined space, is I've just allowed, whatever emotions have come up, I've just honored them at the door and said, yep, I see you, I feel you. I've literally allowed myself to really feel them. I've done a lot of breathing. And yet I've also come back to practicing the rituals that I talk about, and You've Got This, of grounding myself in that certainty that within me lays all the resources that I need to meet the challenges of this time and the uncertainty of whatever the future holds. Because, man, I don't know what the future holds. No one knows how this is going to unfold. I do know that the world will tilt back on its right axis. I do know that life will be good again. I do know that this storm will pass, but I don't know when, and I don't know quite how and what order all things will happen in. And so in the meantime, I just focus on what strengthens me and not on what scares me.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I want to bring you back to the whole idea of accepting emotions. I find myself, I'll go along fine and I'm doing my work and I've got my 3 kids at home and we're 3 dogs pounding up and down the staircase all the day, interrupting my podcasts and TV appearances and everything. But, in the midst of it all, I find myself occasionally just grabbed by this sudden, what? Really? Am I really in this twilight zone? And then I look out the window and I'd never even heard of COVID. And so I find myself shocked by such a sudden change. And probably 2% of the time, I just can't believe it. So I think what you're saying is let those emotions of shock or anxiety or vulnerability wash through you, acknowledge them, accept that they're there, and then move on. Is that right?
Yeah. Jill Bolte-Taylor, who's a neuroanatomist, she talked about this and I wrote about this, and you've got this as well, how by simply stopping and pausing from our busy doing and I usually then add on, just stop and breathe for a minute, because sometimes I noticed even in the last couple of weeks, I was just doing that really shallow breathing, that stress response where you can have that fight, flight, freeze response where we're not really deeply breathing. We're not really getting all that oxygen flowing fully through our body. And just stopping and really breathing, feeling the feet, the ground beneath my feet, feeling my, doing a body scan, my bottom on the chair. And I'll put my hand wherever I notice that anxiety in my body. Sometimes it's in my stomach, like in the pit of my stomach, this sick feeling. Mm-hmm. And in the first few days when Andrew was really sick in hospital, my chest, I felt like a car was parked on it. And I would just put my hand on my heart and on my chest, and I would just breathe in, just literally just breathe and notice the breathing. And I would breathe in faith and breathe out fear and breathe in faith again. And I do that for like a minute or two. And Jill Bolte-Taylor says, even in 90 seconds, not 90 minutes, even in the space of 90 seconds, it can really loosen that constriction in our body. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of want to talk about this, not just through an intellectual lens, but fear lives in our bodies and it creates tension in our bodies. And so a lot of people right now, given all the tension, are probably feeling like their back's tight and there could be all sorts of ailments come out of this too, where we're carrying so much tension. And so part of trusting ourselves that we've got this is really giving ourselves also permission to feel whatever emotions come up, because we're human and we emote before we reason, and the emotions are valid and our fear is valid. We just don't want to get stuck in it. We don't want to get consumed by it. And what I see happening to a lot of people, I'm living here in Singapore at the moment. Obviously, I mix with a lot of expatriates. A lot of people like myself have children on different continents. Yeah. And I see a lot of people getting super stressed out about their kids being on another continent, and a lot of planes aren't flying. So you can't just go to another continent. You can't just get on a plane right now. So we literally shut off from being able to physically get to, like, my parents and 3 of my 4 children and my sibling, all of that. And if all I did was dwell on what made me anxious, I would be so anxious, I would be dysfunctional.
Right.
And I would probably be sick. And I'm sure my immune system function would be lower. And thank God I have not contracted this virus. I mean, Andrew was only back 48 hours and he was in hospital, but I've been under a strict quarantine watch. The Singapore Ministry of Health calls me 3 times a day to check my temperature. So very different than obviously US protocols. Like, everyone who has the virus is hospitalized until they test negative. No one is sent home. And anyone in their immediate orbit is under a tight watch for their own infection risk.
Yeah.
So it's extremely tight protocols in Singapore, which is sort of why it's being hailed as the gold standard. I wrote a Forbes column on that just the other day, what the things that have, how it's been managed here. But bringing this back to, for me, my own experience of, being here in a country that's not really my home country. It's just where I'm living for the minute. with my husband sick, with children in other continents, it would be easy in a time like that to just get swept up in the anxiety of it all.
Right.
But that wouldn't serve my kids. It wouldn't serve my husband, and it would not serve me.
Right.
And so,
but you acknowledged it, Margie. You stopped and kind of let those emotions go through. I know I've interviewed like thousands of psychologists, and I know you've got to acknowledge these things, right? You can't just sweep it away and stop
don't
it
be
at the door.
stoic. Don't be stoic. And I think men can be more inclined to, just because of social gender norms, more inclined to, oh, it's all good. No, I'm fine. Yes, all good, good. I mean, no, you're not fine. You might be fine sometimes. I've been really good sometimes. I'm not always anxious. Sometimes I've actually never felt more purposeful and powerful in the last few weeks as well. But it kind of goes up and down. And so I think don't be so strong. Don't try and be, oh, I'm so strong, I've got it together. No, it's okay. Not necessarily with everyone, but just to share with people. Yeah, I'm having one of those days. I'm feeling a bit emotionally fragile today. And if you got to have a tears, as I rang up my sisters or a few friends, and like in the very first day or two, I had a cry. So yes, have I got this? You bet I've got this, Judy. I've never felt more sure of my ability to meet life's challenges as I have in the last 2 weeks. But that doesn't mean I haven't had moments of overwhelm. And I think the two absolutely coexist, because I think we access our greatest strength by allowing ourselves to be vulnerable to the whole full catastrophe of life's emotions and what it is to be human, and not shut down parts because, oh, that seems weak or scary or uncomfortable. But to just say, I honor, I acknowledge it all, but then to double down on the things that strengthen us. And I think that's right now for anyone who's listening who might be feeling anxious or overwhelmed or just have little waves of it. Just be really intentional about where you're putting your focus. What are you talking about? If you're talking about to people all the time on how stressful it is and how bad it is and how negative the future looks, that'll just leave you in that state of negativity and stress and anxiety. And I think of the analogy, ships don't sink because of the water that's around them. They sink because of the water that gets in them. And so for us right now, we're a sail in choppy seas, and there is a lot of stress and negativity and fear around us, a lot of doomsdaying, all sorts of negative fear casts of what the future looks like. And we have to really stand guard on our space around us, the conversations we're in, the energy around us, the emotions that are around us, lest we get swept up into other people's negativity and into other people's fears. And then they set up residence in our own heads.
Let's talk about, this is good. Let's talk about the stories, the narratives. Psychologists study the narratives we tell, right? We tell ourselves. And because those kind of reverberate, something happens and I can tell myself, if I'm an empty nester, as you know, I wrote my book, Happy Nest, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home. You could tell yourself one narrative when your kids first left. Of course, my 3 are back now, but you could tell yourself one narrative when your kids leave that, oh my gosh, I'm older, I'm in the last half or third of my life. You can tell a narrative and keep telling yourself that story over and over again. Or you can tell yourself a different narrative. Whoa, we're living longer, I'm healthier, I'm launching a new career, which I just did at age 60. And that narrative, you keep telling yourself that. Can you apply this whole concept in psychology of the narrative and the positive note to the COVID-19 situation we find ourselves drowning in?
Yeah. I mean, we live in language, and our words create our reality. And the conversations we have, both the ones in our own heads and the ones we have with others, really shape our experience of life. And so we can talk up our stress. If I sat here and spent 10 minutes telling you about everything that could be a source of stress, I literally would feel more stressed.
Right.
And so I think we have to really take like 150,000% ownership right now of what we're focusing our attention on, and the conversations we're having with others and the ones in our own heads, and check yourself. And if you find yourself feeling anxious, going, well, what is it I'm telling myself? What is it I'm buying into now? And, and you've got this, the chapter 2 is on doubt your doubts. We have doubts about ourselves and our ability to do things and cope with things and achieve things as well. And doubt those stories and those beliefs that you're buying into. Don't treat them as the truth. They're not necessarily the truth. Oh my God, this is how we're going to, like, who says that's true? I'm telling you, there's good things going to come out of this storm we're in right now. Some people are going to grow in enormous ways and are going to look back at it and go, I didn't like it. I didn't want it. I didn't enjoy it. But man, I have a deepened appreciation for life, and I learned to do this, and I use my time this way. And I mean, we have opportunities in the midst of this global pause right now to do good things and to make good of this and to be a source of goodness for others. But we have to be very intentional around that. And so I think whether it's in the middle of a pandemic, Judy, or it's just in the middle of our ordinary lives, which right now seem to be better than we thought they were at the time, right? 3 months ago, people would have said, oh yeah, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of uncertainty, I got a lot going on. And now they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I was back in December.
Right.
And so December seemed so perfect. Life was so perfect then, but back then we didn't think it was perfect. We were thinking about all the other things that weren't quite right at the time. And so I think that's where, our experience of life is built on what we're buying into and what we're telling ourselves. And that's where at times like this, as you know, and I'm sure your research with others has shown, focusing in on the good, focusing in on what's within our control, not what's outside of it, and doubling down on gratitude. Mm-hmm. Like, wow. I was talking to my son this morning, Lachlan. He is in New York. He goes to NYU. He's studying social work, and he really chose he wanted to stay in New York through this time. And he's bearing witness to something in history that we will talk about for the rest of his life. That is, we're all experiencing a significant event in history. And we were just chatting, and he's in a great mindset. He's a really beautiful young man. And I said, Lachlan, do you realize here I am looking at you, and you can see my face perfectly, and I can see your face perfectly. And we're talking in real time. No pixelated image. No wait 3 seconds to figure out what he just said. I said, 20 years ago, when I moved to the United States, I moved to the US just after 9/11. And I remember back in those early days, so 2001, 2002, for me to call my parents in Australia, I had to have this phone card, and I had to dial a number. Then I would have to put in like a 15-digit number, and then I would call their number. And then, so it took about a minute and a half, and then I would talk to my mom in Australia. And now with just one little press on my smartphone, I'm looking at my kids all over the world, and I can chat, and we can laugh, and, all sorts of just wonderful things. And what a blessing that is. And how much do we take for granted?
And that's bringing you back to gratitude, the science of gratitude, right? And
how easily we can take for granted. Even this podcast right now. How cool is that?
Right. Right. Gratitude. Let's talk about the science of gratitude. I know that gratitude has been kind of a buzzword in psychology. It's been flying around for a couple of just in recent years. I devour a lot of pop psychology and psychology, but gratitude really is a huge thing. A lot of times I have a brother that fights Parkinson's for himself and globally, and every time he sits down, before he goes to sleep, he said he comes up with, I think, 5 things he's grateful for that day. And that's about the most positive, forward charging guy I've ever seen. And I'm like, you got 3 cannonballs on your left leg, and you're doing this. But I think gratitude is a lot of what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. You bet. And I mean, and gratitude is a tonic for life's difficulties. And it's not something we should just practice in good times. I mean, it's easy to be grateful when, you just won a big contract and you've got more money than you really know what to do with, and everyone's in great health and you're sitting somewhere beautiful and the weather's great. I mean, it's easy to be grateful. Actually, the times we have to really be grateful when it's not so easy to be grateful, and because what we focus our attention on expands. Mm-hmm. And my father, I'm not sure if I shared this with you before. My dad left school at 16. He milked cows for 50 years, morning and night, to just to get through with 7 kids. When he sold his cows, there's no 401k. He doesn't have a lot of money. He lives a very, very simple life with my mom. And, I talk to my dad, who's 84. I'm like, how are you, Dad? He's like, oh, great, glad to be alive. Yeah. And then he always says, I feel like the richest man. He always tells me he feels like the richest man in all the world. And, he really is so wealthy. And there's a lot of people we know have a lot of money who spend their whole lives stressed out about losing it.
Protecting it.
Or whatever. And, I'm like, Dad he doesn't have to worry about that. There isn't much. He's got enough to pay for basic meals, and he doesn't want for much. And I just think how much of that gratitude, it really does make us more present to all that we do have, because we're not sitting there focusing on what we don't have. And right now, none of us have certainty. None of us know what June is going to look like.
Right.
We don't know what plans we can make. I had been planning to move country. My son's planning to go off to Boston College in the fall. I'm like, will he go? We don't even they don't know. No one knows.
But that's your last, right? Then you're an empty. That's your last man standing. You're junior. You're rising.
Yeah. Well, here's my last one living at home. Yes. Right. And so right now we're like, well, we just roll with what we do know. We do know that we're healthy. We do know we have a head over, and I think just let go all the stuff that's outside your control and embrace the discomfort of the not knowing. And I think that just frees up our energy to then get on and make the best of where we are right now. And there's lots of good things we can find in this moment of our pain. And I think of that quote by Maria Rainer Wilke of do not squander the hour of your pain. I'm like, we're in an hour of pain right now. Let's not squander this.
So let's talk about the gifts, the psychological and spiritual gifts that we can emerge from, because I'm all into yoga and meditation and being in the present, but right now I got to look a little bit in the future to think about what the innovations, the kind of spiritual gifts, the opportunities that we can create out of this. I think what we're seeing already is so many people having lost jobs, so many businesses closing, a lot of displacement. So Margie, this is going to be a time, I believe, after this. We're in the dark ages, and I think there's going to be a renaissance, a boom in innovation, in just new ways of thinking. I mean, I've been doing virtual cocktail parties with people I haven't talked to for a while. I make sure I got 4 a week, and I'm realizing, boy, I might just continue that because I haven't seen that person for a year. What are the things you can think of off the top of your head that, well, not off the top of your head, just kind of spiritually, psychologically, what are the gifts that we can extract from being in this global pause?
Well, I think you just mentioning then about seeing people, I think one of the greatest gifts right now is connection. And really authentic, meaningful connection, not the superficial, I like your selfie post and you like my selfie post.
Right.
Superficial stuff that leaves which has left us with this epidemic of loneliness.
Right.
But meaningful connection, real connection. How are you? I'm good and I'm up and I'm down. And but even with with families coming together, I mean, you're so blessed having your 3 children there. And I wished I had my 4 children under my roof right now, and I don't. But okay, let's make the most of our chance to talk more. I've been talking to my kids every day. I don't always talk to them every day. They're kind of busy, and that life gets in that swing of things. So I think for all of us, one is the biggest thing is just deepening the level of connection we have with other people. And if you have time, a lot of people have more time in their day. They're not commuting.
Right.
They're not doing work travels. What can you do with that time that makes that worthwhile? Cooking. My son Lachlan was saying, Mum, I've gone to the supermarket and I'm learning to cook some curries. I've never really been very good at them. I'm like, great. And my son Ben, who's been in quarantine with me, people dropped off all these art supplies and he's been painting, and he's never painted. And I'm, between you and me, I'm not sure that he's, going to be
a painter, a great painter.
Going to make a living out of it.
No Van Gogh, okay. No Van Gogh here.
But that's okay. And he got the guitar out and he's been sort of learning a Tracy Chapman song, and he never played guitar. And so, there's all sorts of things. We can find good when we look for the good. I mean, if you want to look for bad, you've got just knock yourself out because you're going to be able to see it everywhere.
Right.
So I think we have to be so intentional of how we're using our time and how we're using our focus and where we're putting our energy, setting some boundaries on all the negativity, turning off TV. And I know you've done some TV lately, and I was on CNN twice last week, and that's great. And I watch a little bit of it, but I don't want to sit there 24/7 watching any cable show or any news,
It's
because
just too
otherwise
much. It's a fire
it
hose.
is too much.
It's just too much.
Totally.
And Margie, I'm a lifelong journalist. I'm a news guy. I was a journalist on Capitol Hill. I was in the Capitol when the plane, the 9/11 plane aimed for the Capitol crashed. I'm not supposed to be here. I mean, but it's a whole different universe. But reframing is what we have to do. I think that's a term that some of the psychologists use. My husband and I were walking down the street in DC, which is not far from where you were. You're trying to move back here, right? If you can ever get here. But here in Virginia, so I'm walking down the street with my husband, who's a physician, a very scientific type that studies biology and looks at the natural world. And he looks up and he goes, I think the cherry blossoms are different this year. And I looked at him and I looked at this kind of science guy and I said, no, John, the cherry blossoms are not different. These are the same cherry blossoms. The weather pattern, everything is very similar right now if you check the newspaper. But John, you're looking at those cherry blossoms with new eyes because we can't go out to dinner. We can't go to the movies. We're, sequestered at home. So those cherry blossoms are suddenly looking very different to you. Your perspective has changed. And that was startling to me. You probably missed those cherry blossoms, right, Margie?
Yeah. Well, yes, I love the cherry blossoms. I love them and I miss them. We lived in McLean for 7 years and I loved everything about living there. I mean, I just loved it and I will always miss it. So, right. But instead of going, oh, I'm so sorry we left because I didn't want to leave. My husband was transferred but I always look back and with such a grateful heart that we even got to live there. And I go, oh, we made so many great friends, beautiful, cherished, wonderful friends. And I think it's actually some of the friends that we made we cross over our social orbits and with you, Judy, but St. Albans families and what have you. But, I think right now it is so important to just really, yes, use our time well, double down on what strengthens us, build more authentic connections with people, but also take the focus off yourself and what's good for me and look at how can I serve and lift others.
Right. And how might that be? In what form might that come? Margie, you and I, we got the same thing going, right? We're writing, we research, we're speaking, we're putting things out. But what about people that aren't kind of journalist talkers like us? What should they do?
Oh, look. Oh, for goodness sake. You don't have to be a talker or have a podcast or write a book or anything. You have to just literally stop and look around you and think, in my neighborhood, who in my neighborhood might value a little bit of just appreciation or outreach. It might be someone you don't even like. It might be someone actually someone you don't like, then definitely do it. But, there is always opportunities for us to be the neighbor we wished we had, to be the friend, even a better friend than people have been to us. And to look around, I see a lot of people who are really stressed. I'm like, go out of your way and smile. I said to Lachlan in New York, I said, when people are looking anxious, just smile, say hello, just be the change you'd like to see in others. And I think could just be picking up the phone and calling someone or writing a handwritten note or, we don't have to go, doesn't have to be grand gestures of, big generous acts that cost you a lot of money. It could just be something really simple. Cooking a meal for someone and dropping it at their doorstep that lives 3 doors down because that they'd appreciate that favorite dish you make. I think there's lots of things we can do right now to just be the kind of citizen and the community member and person that we want to have more of. And I think it doesn't just elevate us. It doesn't just elevate them. I think they tell other people, everyone feels good about it.
Right, right. Well, I know the human brain it's wired for interconnectedness, for altruism. There's a reason we're not on our own islands or our own independent Idahos. We're wired for this. But as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, we've fallen into globally and nationally into this period of unprecedented loneliness, isolation, loneliness. Well, now, Margie, we're really isolated. We're physically isolated, but perhaps that physical isolation is a door, if we use it right and are mindful enough to get out of the physical isolation, but out of this kind of psychological, interpersonal isolation and loneliness. What's with that trend, and what do you think on that?
I wish they had called it physical distancing and not social distancing, because I think right now we have to be more socially connected than ever.
Yeah.
Because we know, and the research shows that, and even that Harvard study that was done, the longest longitudinal study in history, what that found was that people who had the highest levels of well-being, who had the highest recovery rates from cancer, who lived the longest and had the highest quality of life longest into their lives, were people who had strong social networks.
Right.
And so for all of us, and it's about what you put in. Be the kind of person that you'd want to hang out with. And reach out to people, and don't wait for others to reach out to you. Reach out. You be the person that does that. I think often we're like, I haven't spoken to them for 3 years, and I shouldn't do that. And it's funny, when I've gone back to McLean over the years, just outside DC where we used to live, and I'll go back, and I've got a few great friends I'm in touch with more so than others. And, a few of them, one of my gorgeous friends, Erin, once said, she said, "Can I host something for you?" They're members of the Washington Golf Club. I was like, "I would love that." And she's like, "Invite who you want to invite." And it was just great. And all these people came, and they hadn't seen each other, and everyone loves seeing each other. And I thought, now, isn't this a shame that I have to fly from the other side of the world for this group of people who really enjoy getting together to get together?
But it takes energy. It takes energy to put them together. It takes an idea. It takes planning. And you are kind of putting yourself a little bit on the line. Hey, do you want to come with me? So I think maybe people are reticent about doing that. And so
that's where my work on courage comes in, right? And I think of my book, Brave, which is my prior book. And that is, just put your damn ego and pride to the side and just risk the rejection and reach out. And here's what I've found. Very rarely when I reach out to someone to rekindle a friendship or even to start a friendship. And because I've had to move countries, I've had to build friendships from scratch multiple times. And every now and again, someone's kind of too busy and you sense maybe they're not so interested. But I tell you what, most of the time people are just generally, I would love to catch up with you. And I know what it's like to be busy because I'm super busy. Sometimes I can't catch up in a short term. And sometimes it's like, can we just grab a 5 o'clock wine just for an hour, one day, whatever. It doesn't have to be a whole night. It could just be a quick thing. Most people really appreciate the outreach. I very rarely ring up someone I haven't seen for a few years and say, "Hi, how are you?" And they go, "Oh my God, I'm so not interested in talking to you." They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great to hear from you." And so you be the person that does the reach. Don't wait for others to reach out to you.
Margie, I was thinking you just, since we have these common friends, our former Congresswoman friend, mine from college, Barbara Jean Comstock, and then we have these other friends in McLean, I was thinking, gee, I should extend my virtual cocktail hour. I'll put Margie in it, but Margie, we have a problem. What's our 12-hour problem, and who would have to drink in the morning?
Heck, I can always have a cup of tea. I'm good
joking.
For a cup of tea. And
Me too.
At 7 in the morning, at your 7 at night, maybe I'll stick with the tea without a shot of anything in it. But honestly, we've got some friends here in Singapore, and they've got friends they're Americans, and and on a Sunday morning, they were drinking margaritas with their family back in the U. And, you can make things work and have some fun. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of people having a lot of fun, and I've been in quarantine for nearly 2 weeks. So I haven't been able to see anyone.
Oh boy.
And I've had a wine, not every night with someone, but I had a great wine with someone last night. And we have this technology. Imagine if it had been 20 years ago, we couldn't just do it. So I know I'm harping on about the technology. I don't understand how technology
huge.
Works.
It's amazing.
But I'm just like, how much do we take this for granted that we can actually just look at someone with the press of a button at no cost and be just looking at their face? So I just say get over your discomfort at that and just do it.
And just do it. And you know what? A lot of us have boomerang young adults at home. And if you can't get a grip on the technology, certainly if you've got anybody under 30 in your house, probably better is under 25. There's some kind of magic about the technological skills of the millennials. I tap into those, and I'm dragging my kids in here constantly. I am learning technology by leaps and bounds with 3 20-somethings in my house, right? So take advantage, carpe diem, work with what you have, realize this is temporary, we're moving out of this, and think of all the amazing gifts, innovation, new ways of thinking that we're going to take with us and be safe. Give me a closing as we wrap up, Margie, here. This has been a wonderful reconnection with you. Give me a couple of, just throw a couple quick pieces of advice at us. I know you're never at a loss for words.
Oh man, Judy, you're throwing at me. Okay. I would simply say
Catch
to
that
anybody,
ball.
you know what? It's something that I found really, I'm a journaler and I write in a journal, but you know what? If there's one thing I would say to do, just sit down and write down a list of how it is that you want to show up for the people in your life in the next few months. Write down some words. Maybe it's optimistic, calm, confident, upbeat, fun, playful, joyful, grateful. I don't know.
Adaptive, creative.
Fine, open-minded, whatever it is. Yeah, creative. You're going to try technology. And, just put it on a piece of paper somewhere. Put it on a sticky note. Stick it on your fridge. Stick it on your bathroom mirror. And just remind yourself, in the midst of this storm, this is who I choose to be. And when there's so much uncertain around us, it's so out of control, we need to look at what's within our control and go, I'm going to ground myself in the certainty of who I choose to be. And it doesn't mean we're always going to be that way. We'll have moments where we fall down. But I think when we're really intentional about how we want to move through this period, it allows us to do so in a way that will help us weather it better and to emerge from it better off.
Wonderful. So we're closing out today on the Happiness Podcast with Margie Warrell, who has a new book out, who, just like me, can't go on a book tour, but we're going to be adaptive, and we're going to work any way we can virtually. Margie's new book is You've Got This, and it sounds to me, Margie, like you've got it.
Thank you, as do you, Judy, and to everyone listening. You've got it too, and thank you for listening. And if I can inspire you or support you with my new book, I would be very honored.
Thanks for tuning into my Happiness Podcast, where we explore how to get the best out of the empty nest. I hope you'll subscribe, write a review, and reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out my website, judyhollandauthor.com. Have a great day, and remember, make it happen.